There's just going to be some Binding of Isaac Rebirth in the background for this rant. Several of my recent videos have been about how people use games and other entertainment to influence the opinions of young people. There has also been an ongoing thread in which I explain I don't think it is an inherent property of games that they have some power to push stuff onto people, but rather because they are engaging and entertaining, and because people like music, if you can use music to do it, they work as part of something else that you're doing. If you're trying to force your views or opinions on someone, adding games and music into what you're doing will make it more engaging, in particular, as I keep saying, for kids, because they're into that stuff. They're not going to get so bored if you're just trying to dryly push your views on them. Here is an example of that being done to me in my life. At primary school, we would have to regularly get together in assembly and sing Christian songs. Now, just getting together and singing songs is fun, and I'm sure there's some effect of being around other people and doing that same thing loudly, but I'm not an expert on this. I imagine this is why megachurches exist. We could have been singing absolutely anything, and if it had just been these songs, I don't think it would have done anything. But at my school, there was this constant thread of saying Christianity is true, this is true, this is correct, and then you also go and you sing these songs to make it more fun. Almost like the point is just to permeate every aspect of your life. And of course, music and entertainment is just another aspect of your life to push it into. I mean, there is the angle of if you wanted to take a piece of music that says something is true and, lock up a kid and force them to listen to that and say this is true, I'm sure that would work. It would mess them up, but I bet they'd accept it. But then again, you could do that with absolutely anything. It's not a power of music or a game you'd be forcing them to play. The point of this kind of soft indoctrination is to make people willing to engage because it's fun. And rather than engage them intellectually, you say, this is true, and this is fun. So they're gonna accept that if you're constantly telling them that it's true and it also feels good. So that's the sort of package option. That is using games and entertainment as a tool as part of something bigger. I do, however, think you could actually screw up someone's worldview just with a game, not even pushing it on them. And I'm gonna use this video to lay out how I would try to do that to someone. As a child, I was sort of top in my class in maths, and part of that was the game Math Blaster. No one was forcing me to do it. My parents just got me this game and I really liked it because of the way it looked and things like that. I enjoyed it. I wanted to progress in the game, so I learned how to play the game. Incidentally, the way you play this game relates to how mathematics works in real life, and so I improved at basic mathematics through playing this game, and that did absolutely transfer into real life. Now that is something in a fictional game world that represents something in real life that I have engaged with and then transferred from the fictional world into my real life. That is pretty amazing. What we have cultural critics saying, though, is things like viewing violence in a game, just like you'd see maths in a game. That relates to real life, and it's saying seeing that violence gives you the message that violence is okay. Bollocks. For many reasons, that is not the same as something like learning maths from a game. That experience is entirely subjective. If you have 10 people looking at a game about maths, they're probably, unless they're an idiot, going to get the same exact message out of it. Looking at some brutality in a game, though, they are probably going to take away from that some feelings. And I imagine a spectrum of feelings. Some people will think it's gross, some people will think it's cool. You might even just appreciate the color palette, something like that. Whereas, like I said, with something like a maths game like Math Blaster, your interpretation of it is either going to be right or wrong. I do not buy the sort of cultural criticism and semiotics idea that every image you see acts as a sign that carries a message. I do not believe everything works as language. While everything can cause you to have thoughts and ideas, I do not think everything is able to do it as consistently as some kinds of messages, because it is not an inherent property of what you're looking at. Ironically though, all of these people saying that seeing violence makes you think it's okay are going to create a cultural standard whereby seeing violence tells you that violence is okay. They are the ones working to turn it into that, trying to set the standards of this new kind of language, and they teach people that it means that, and then to those people, seeing it means that. It does not mean that to the general population, however. And so the idea that it will influence them towards believing violence is okay is nonsense, because to them, that is not the message they are getting. It's not saying that to them at all. I guess for people like culture critics though, once they have taught themselves that language, it is very hard not to see anymore. But it mustn't be forgotten that that is something they have done to themselves. They are not seeing it the way anyone else does. Like Sarkeesian said, once you learn this, you start seeing racism and sexism everywhere, almost as if you learnt a second language and then all of a sudden bits of your language remind you of that other language. Except here, what they have learned is a second nonsense language, and they have disconnected themselves from culture. Anyway, back to my point. How would I indoctrinate people? Let's take the idea of a game like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, a game that teaches you about geography. If you give your child that game, to some degree you are putting faith into the game maker that their ideas about geography are accurate to what's accepted in real life. Your kid will learn about geography, but they will learn about the geography that is presented in the game. Let's say it's just a really fun game that they love, and in order to progress, they need to get better at the game, and getting better at the game is also the same as learning geography. People even play historical strategy games and they will pick up real-life facts. What happens when these things are slightly inaccurate? You learn those inaccuracies. It seems like every time I go on Reddit, I see a thread about how people have been misled by a movie that relates to real life, is more or less real, provides a little fact, and people pick it up, but it's simply not true. No big deal though, right? You figure out that it's not true and it's like, oh wow, I just took that as fact. Silly me. What if you made a game that deliberately lied to children? If you made a math blaster that made sense but was absolutely wrong and screwed up people's fundamental understanding of mathematics, or at least, using a base 10 number system and bit maths. I think if a kid got into that game and felt good and really enjoyed playing it and just did it over and over again, they would pick it up as strongly as anyone who played a game that told them the truth, except it would just be wrong and they would be screwed up a bit, and I could imagine it taking quite a lot of effort to correct them. But obviously, that kind of thing would be caught. Why would anyone want to do that? As soon as a parent figures out, oh wow, this game is just bollocks, they'd get rid of it and say, hang on, I'll get you a better game. Because games are really, really good learning tools. Even in music, if you're learning to sight read, there are some games where you can play like note finder games. Those are really good. It would also be very obvious when they're wrong, and you would have no reason for wanting a wrong version of that game to exist. That would simply be trolling. Let's look at another subject though. Let's look at games that will teach you geography. What might a pro-Palestine geography learning game look like? Just consider how it may be shaped by any number of political disagreements, depending on who's making the game. That might not be something that jumps out at people as wrong. You might never see your kid playing that bit. And if it is just like naming places and they find that really fun, they're going to be grinding that into themselves just to win the game. And this simply is why I'm so concerned about extremists being in charge of helping to develop educational gaming content. And I'm concerned about this because there is, rightly, a push for using games in education. They are effective tools for helping people learn, and they have been known as that for decades. But also, the people spearheading this have some pretty fucking wacky worldviews. And I think it is extremely important, if you are going to create games that will engage children and make them memorize things, that you are helping them memorize facts and not opinions or ideology. But, as usual, that's just another one of my harmful opinions.